Hello, EnteiTainment here. My name is Daniel, and welcome to my first team builder for the GDS. In this video, I will be walking you through the approach I took to prepare for my week 1 match against jjgalz and his DC Umbreon. So if that interests you, stick around. Before we begin, I want to briefly talk about the formatting for both this video and for this series as a whole. I'm hoping to keep it quick and concise, similar to my draft analysis video, so I will not be going over every single thought that went through my head. I will talk generally about my process, hit on a couple main points, and then close with the team itself while trying to keep it entertaining. So if you get through this video, feel free to let me know if you like the format or if you want to see some changes. Any feedback is obviously welcome. Anyways, like I said, myself and the Syracuse Sylveons are going to be squaring off against jjgalz and his DC Umbreon. I don't think I have any experience battling against this coach, but for all I know, he changed his screen name recently, and I've actually known him since childbirth. But in any event, I don't know him as far as I know, which is a change of pace from the CSO, where the coaches stayed more or less the same each season, and I got used to their play styles and strategies and whatnot. Like Ant-Man thinking Haunter is a counter to Terrakion.
This team is just so weak to Terrakion, and since he lost his Slowbro immediately, like everything else I can hit super effectively on this team. So it was really just about killing Slowbro, and he ended up like sacking it in the first 3 turns. So Haunter is not a counter to Terrakion just because it's a ghost type, so it will go down to that.
Or that Durant is a defensive wall. So already a new challenge that I am excited to face. Now that the formalities are out of the way, let's remind everyone of my draft and also take a closer look at the DC Umbreon. Oh, and before I forget, all the Excel graphics used in this video and in any team builder video are courtesy of Kraken Nation's team builder, so thanks for all the work, buddy. It's not the most recent version by a long shot, but for some reason I've always been partial to this one. But anyways, when I first start team building, I always take a look at the overall resistances for my opponent's draft to find a chink in the armor, so to speak. Like I said in an earlier video, I think it is much more effective to try to exploit a draft that has a small number of resistances than trying to take advantage of a high number of weaknesses. So we'll see he did pretty well and has no glaring 1s or 0s in the resistances column, so I had to turn to the 2s instead. There are a scattering of them, but I focused especially on Fire and Ghost because I have Chandelure, who obviously carries Stab for both of those typings and can hit like a truck, but him also having only 2 rock resistances might also make him nervous about preparing for the Mega Tyranitar's monstrous 164 attack stat, especially since it can carry weird special coverage and boost with Dragon Dance. That was pretty much it in terms of resistances, but I kept the only 2 normal and 2 dragon resistances in the back of my mind as well. But anyways, once the preliminary resistance screening is out of the way, I really try to dig into each of the individual Pokemon on the opponent's draft and see the battle from the other coach's perspective. In a sense, it's like I'm reversing the roles and pretending that I have the DC Umbreon and am preparing for the Syracuse Sylveons. And in this light, I am more likely to identify his powerful offensive threats that he too will probably also recognize, while additionally trying to decide how he might answer my offensive threats. So in terms of individual matchups, we'll see that Mega Beedrill is easily faster than everything on my draft, and even some of my Scarfers, like Scarfed Chandelure, will be outpaced. So this is pretty scary, especially considering that Beedrill can slaughter my upper tier mons, Mega Tyranitar Latias, and Tapu Bulu. Komo-o and Pangoro are also threatening, since Tapu Bulu is my only fairy type, and as if that wasn't enough, the only damaging fairy move it has access to is Dazzling Gleam, and on top of that it gets smacked by Poison Jab, obviously, so that's all bad. But Reuniclus is also always a threat, especially since it carries coverage to hit my boosting dark types, Mega Tyranitar and Scrafty with a quad effective Focus Blast or Dazzling Gleam, respectively. Aromatisse, serves a similar role in denying my Dark types and Mega Latias, but at least it doesn't get Recover. The other good news is that Golbat matches up really nicely against most of his physical threats, and the mere existence of Lantern may make him nervous about bringing Jolteon or Mantine. And actually, speaking of Mantine, the DC Umbreon really only have two defoggers, Mantine and Landorus Therian, plus Beedrill, I guess. But if he whips out defog on Mega Beedrill, that's probably a good thing for me. But given that Lantern counters Mantine pretty hard, and Lando is obviously the preferred hazard clearer if he is expecting Galvantula with Sticky Web, I'm expecting a defensive Landorus for hazard control, and for switching into stuff like Mega Tyranitar, Ambipom, and Scrafty. The final note will be that things like Heatran, Pangoro, and even Eradicate Alola can all take advantage of Chandelure, which I identified as one of my main threats, so I may need to do some whittling, but if not, all three of those Pokemon do get blown up by Dragon Dance Scrafty, which is a pretty nice segue into the last thing we'll talk about, which is the team I intend to bring. I feel pretty confident about it at the moment, but if I make any changes, I'll be sure to let you all know before the battle. We'll start with my expected win conditions, being either Dragon Dance Scrafty or Calm Mind Latias, the latter of which may get subbed for something not weak to Aromatisse. But regardless, the booster that ends up sweeping will depend largely on what opposing Pokemon are left standing when late game rolls around. Even though each is carrying coverage moves, Latias will function best if Heatran and Pangoro are out of the way, whereas Scrafty will obviously blow through those two, but might get stopped by Como-O and Reuniclus, which in turn should get killed by Latias. So it's sort of nice that they counter each other's counters, I guess. Aromatisse can probably answer both boosters, like I said earlier, unless they get really set up. So again, like I said, I may remove Latias or give Scrafty Poison Jab over Ice Punch, but then Landorus becomes a problem, so whatever. Unlike Latias, Scrafty can at least take a hit from Mega Beedrill, but obviously neither of these sweepers really appreciate Mega Beedrill being around, which brings us to Ambipom, our first supporting member of the team, who can practically one-shot Mega Beedrill with a Fake Out. I may need a tiny amount of chip damage depending on his EVs, but one switch into Rocks is all it will take. And speaking of Stealth Rocks, our next opposing Pokemon is Landorus, which I will be using as my guaranteed lead unless I see Frostlass, probably. Hidden Power Ice will do a lot of damage to his Landorus, Yashi Berry or not. Earth Power obviously hits Heatran, another potential rocker, but it is also just powerful stab that can dent practically anything. Knockoff is just for utility, and although I would prefer to keep this thing around for death fodder in order to gain momentum down the line, it may be forced to become a suicide lead. Chandelure is coming for reasons we've already discussed, mainly being that it hits really hard and it could be difficult for him to switch into, and since essentially none of the limited coverage Chandelure gets is overly useful to me in this matchup, I opted for Trick to potentially cripple a defensive Mon, and Memento to pave the way for one of my win conditions. And then finally, I slapped Golbat on the team for emergency hazard control and something to switch into Mega Beedrill, Landorus, and some other offensive threats. It's obviously a lot of pressure for poor Golbat, especially since Knockoff, which Pangoro gets, will remove a lot of his bulk, but hopefully he can just roost and keep on keeping on. So anyways, guys, that is the team builder. Like I said, I'll make sure to let you guys know if anything changes before the actual match. But I hope you enjoyed the video. Let me know what you thought. And as always, have an excellent rest of your day. This has been Daniel, and EnteiTainment out.